Welcome to the Eye Opener. I'm your host, Michael Lewis. Do you know what special drawings rights are? Well, the IMF has approved $650 billion of them for its push for global economic reset. A Republican probe of the U.S. Navy found the armed forces aren't prepared to face the greatest threat of the century. As the bipartisan lawmakers come out to support Cuba's anti-communism protest, the squad remains atypically quiet. The Arizona Senate confirms the hand count result isn't matching up with Maricopa County's tally. Okay, my friends, let's take a closer look together. The board of the International Monetary Fund approved $650 billion worth of special drawing rights, SDRs. This amount is historical as it's more than double the total amount of SDRs created since the beginning of the IMF in 1944. This unprecedented delivery of SDRs has the backing from both the Biden administration and the CCP. Doesn't this sound ominous? Indeed it does. The creation of SDRs has been largely controversial. But to understand the scope of the problem, let's first take a look at what the special drawings rights are trying to do. Special drawing rights were created because of the concern that U.S. dollars and gold were the only means of settling international accounts. SDRs are an international reserve asset to supplement its member countries' official reserves. The value of an SDR is based on 5 leading currencies: the U.S. dollar, the euro, the Chinese yuan, the Japanese yen, and the British pound. SDRs aren't money in the classical sense, as they can't be used to make purchases directly, but that's its current status. Over the last decade, there has been an increasing call from globalists, including Chinese central bank officials, to make the SDR into a true global currency, under the bigger push of the Great Reset. Now, the Great Reset is not a conspiracy theory. It's the name of last year's 50th annual meeting of the World Economic Forum. And the head of the forum, Klaus Schwab, has written a book about it. Interestingly, the book was published in August 2020, just 5 months after the pandemic started. To conceive, research, and write an idea for a book and get it printed and published within 5 months takes superpowers. So most surely the idea behind the Great Reset was planned well in advance. So what is the Great Reset about? Globalists say the initiative is to rebuild society and the economy in a more sustainable way following the COVID-19 pandemic. The idea is pushed by the most influential global organizations such as the UN, the World Economic Forum, and the IMF we just talked about, as well as state leaders like Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, US President Joe Biden, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, and the British monarchy. Critics say the Great Reset is about expanding government power and suppressing liberty worldwide. As a Forbes article described, the Great Reset is another example of powerful elites salving their consciences with faux efforts to help the masses, and in the process, make themselves even wealthier and more powerful. So, economic reform is one major focus of the push. Now, getting back to using these SDRs to reset the global economy, what's the immediate impact? It'll greatly sideline and weaken the US dollar's role as the global reserve currency while redistributing America's remaining wealth to foreigners and third world regimes. Governments, central banks, and businesses around the world have held in reserve large amounts of dollars to settle international transactions. If the dollar were to lose status, the demand for dollars would plunge. The U.S.'s purchasing power would collapse, creating a crisis for Americans to buy goods and services abroad. And you will never guess who will be one of the biggest beneficiaries of replacing the dollar with SDRs would be the CCP. A former senior leader at Bretton Woods' monetary management system says the CCP in other countries' schemes to undermine the dollar are becoming more apparent. The former official warns that the CCP is looking for a way to take the United States down because the U.S. is a speed bump on the road to global power. Communists crave for absolute control, while America's founders recognized that political power, either that of politicians or political institutions, had to be limited to protect the people. This is the fundamental difference. If the special drawing rights or the Great Reset are created to do good for the people, it'll be a good thing. Yet, if they are to serve the global power holders' interest, they'll be very bad for the citizens of the world. A new report commissioned by Republican lawmakers found that since the end of the Cold War, the Navy has been drifting away from training its sailors on how to win wars. Instead, it's focusing more and more on advancing military careers and political correctness. The Navy is getting weak, but who cares about that, right? As long as they're getting woke. A congressional review was led by Senator Tom Cotton and 3 GOP House members. 77 sailors of varying ranks and jobs were interviewed at the report, concluding they were overwhelmingly frustrated with non-essential training. While the inclusion of training topics like diversity, human sex trafficking prevention, and suicide prevention seems appropriate, too much of that takes up a significant amount of Navy resources and previous combat training time. One black lieutenant said, "Sometimes I think we care more about whether we have enough diversity officers than if we'll survive a fight with the Chinese Navy. It's criminal. They think my only value is as a black woman. But you cut our ship open with a missile and we'll all bleed the same color." Sailors aren't even sufficiently trained to handle a ship, let alone a missile attack. Before 2003, surface warfare officers attended weeks of hands-on and simulated training. However, after 2003, they were given 23 CDs. No one would ever expect an aviator to land a plane on a flight deck or a submarine officer to dive the boat after a few weeks of reading content on 23 CDs. A recently retired senior Navy serviceman said, "I guarantee you every unit in the Navy is up to speed on their diversity training," but he could not say the same about ship handling training. The number one goal of military should be to win wars and defend its country, and I'm sorry for overstating the obvious. And Representative Jim Banks said Tuesday, at a time when the Navy's readiness is more critical than ever before, this report depicts a Navy leadership that's distracted from the number one threat to American national security, the Chinese Communist Party. China's Navy has well exceeded the U.S. Navy in size and has been chomping at the bit to cause trouble in the Indo-Pacific Sea. Is America ready to take on the threat? This is not the time to boast diversity training. Here's what the Navy should be focusing on as recommended by the report. Renew military's noble tradition of remaining out of politics, limit social media accounts and activities by Navy officials, discourage the use of toxic platforms by sailors, replace all political and sociological education with essential war-fighting courses. The report warns that conflicts in the 21st century will likely play out largely at sea. Unless changes are made, the Navy's risks losing its next major battle. The Biden administration isn't willing to call the Cuban regime communist or socialist. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki talked about economic mismanagement and repression by the Cuban regime and described the protests as people's spontaneous expressions of their frustration. But we all know there's something missing. On Tuesday, Senator Marco Rubio went onto the Senate floor and called on Congress to be clear in its language about the Cuban regime. He noted the Cuban government's total control of goods and services and American imports to the country. The totalitarian regime uses any opening as a tool and weaponizes it because that's what communists, Marxists, and socialists do.
At the end of the day, the Cuban regime will control that opening. It's not just what we want to do, it's what they want to do. You want to do tourism? We tried that in 2015 when the Obama changes. And you know what they did? They said, "Thank you. We love the fact you're coming here as tourism." Guess what? All the tourist sites are owned by a holding company named Gaesa, controlled by the Cuban military. So everything comes through our hands. You want to send them food? That's great. Guess who gets it? Alimport, which is a government, military-owned agriculture company. You can't sell it to a small grocery store in Cuba or even a food wholesaler. It goes to the Cuban government. You want to send money? They take it. You know why? Because socialism is about control.
Guess who has been totally silent on Cuba's anti-communist protests? The most active social justice advocates in Congress. People like Senator Bernie Sanders and the squad members, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Representative Ilhan Omar, have zero tolerance for minorities and people of color being repressed around the world. They call for Black Lives Matter, Palestinian Lives Matter, but they wouldn't say anything on the communist repression of Cubans? That's because they can't go against themselves. Their radical and socialist agendas are precisely rooted in communism. Moreover, the Biden administration has made it clear that it will turn away asylum seekers from Cuba. On Tuesday evening, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas warned that people fleeing Cuba and Haiti by boat won't be allowed to enter the United States, even if they demonstrate fear of being persecuted or tortured in their home countries. This is in fact a reasonable policy because in the wake of the chaos happening in Cuba, if you let them in, you can't tell who's legitimate and who's taking advantage of the situation. But radical members in the Congress should be screaming against this. They advocated for an open border, and turning any asylum seekers away was deemed inhuman and xenophobic. So why not this time? Where is AOC? Okay, here's the truth of the matter. People oppressed by a communist regime aren't welcomed because these people most certainly won't support woke Democrats. Now, before we continue, I want to take a quick second to ask all my friends watching and the live chat family to please take a moment to hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't already, but most importantly, share this video. I am depending on you, my friends, and the power of word of mouth to spread the truth. We cannot depend on YouTube to do this. Also, to support the Eye Opener team, please donate to the show or purchase a mug that matters. You can find the link in the description below, and your support, as always, is greatly appreciated. Salute. Arizona Senate President Karen Fann yesterday confirmed the ballot count led by Cyber Ninjas doesn't match the Maricopa County tally for the 2020 election. Cyber Ninjas hasn't released any numbers yet, but the Senate is now set to conduct its own recount using new machines. They will provide a third number to compare with those from the county and from Cyber Ninjas and the other contractors. Without reviewing the actual numbers, Senate Democrats have already pushed back Fann's claim. They said this is a lie. The Democrats say they are confident about the 2020 election in Maricopa County because they conducted a hand count last year. The county is required by law to oversee a hand count following a presidential election. They counted a sample of 47,000 votes, which they claim matched the machine tally 100%. What they didn't say is that the sample was selected by people overseeing the election. We absolutely have no confidence in that effort. Democrats also claimed Cyber Ninjas didn't involve them in the audit. The fact is, the audit firm was open to anyone volunteering, but Democrats chose not to. Cyber Ninjas adopted Jovan Pulitzer's method, which looks at every ballot, counts it, and forensically reviews it for legitimacy. They did this for all 2.1 million ballots. The audit in Maricopa County represents more than 60% of the total votes cast in the state. If there are significant problems in the last election, very likely they will be discovered. It's 8 months since the 2020 election, and it has not faded from sight. On Monday, former President Trump released a letter from former federal prosecutor William McSwain in Pennsylvania. McSwain told Trump he was right to be upset about the way the Democrats ran the 2020 election. This is hardly news, but what caught everyone's attention is the former prosecutor's comment on then Attorney General William Barr. McSwain wrote on Election Day and afterward his office. The Eastern District of Pennsylvania received various allegations of voter irregularities. He wanted to be transparent and investigate them fully, but the instruction he got from Barr was not to make any public statements or put out any press releases regarding the irregularities. McSwain was directed to pass serious allegations to the state AG, Josh Shapiro, for investigation, who oddly declared 3 days before Election Day that Trump could not win. McSwain disagreed, but as a Marine infantry officer, he was trained to follow and respect the orders of his superiors, even when he disagreed with them. McSwain is running for governor of Pennsylvania in 2022. In California, another Republican is joining the race to replace Gavin Newsom, who faces a recall precisely 2 months from now. Conservative host Larry Elder announced his bid on July 12. Elder described the government of California as an absolute mess. He said he entered the race after witnessing the state's out-of-control homelessness, spiking crime rate, looming water and power shortages, and the endless COVID lockdowns. Elder's announcement came as a judge rejected Newsom's effort to list himself as a Democrat on the recall ballot. Currently, all candidates in the special election are Republicans, except Newsom. Being the only listed Democrat could be an advantage in a state where Democrats enjoy a lead in voter registration. On the day of the recall election, Californians will be asked two questions. First, should Newsom be removed? And second, who should replace him? At the moment, Newsom is still busy sending big money to state residents. On Tuesday, the governor signed another $100 billion comeback plan for tax relief and stimulus checks. Newsom's office said the new package provides immediate cash relief to middle-class families and businesses. It's the biggest state tax rebate in American history and the largest small business relief package in the nation. In May, Newsom announced that his office expects a staggering $76 billion surplus despite a year of pandemic closures. This is an amount that surpasses most states' annual spending. You should know that California has a progressive income tax structure that leans heavily on top earners. A large share of professionals were able to continue working remotely during the lockdowns thanks to the high-flying Silicon Valley. However, the travel and service industries have experienced widespread job losses that gave California some of the highest unemployment rates in the nation. And that's it for today, my friends. Check out this playlist right here for more eye-opening content. You can join me in the Eye Opener Telegram chat room and follow me on Newmaker, Gab, Parler, and Getter. Don't forget, please sign up to the email list so that we can stay in touch. I'd like to thank you all, and I'll see ya next time.